I had always dreamed of walking on the moon. Still, as the transport ship descended toward the Luna base, Artemis Haven, my anticipation was tinged with fear. The vast gray expanse below was both beautiful and intimidating. The sight of Earth's faint blue glow in the distance was a poignant reminder of why I was here. Earth's ecosystems were crumbling, and we needed to terraform more of the moon's surface to eventually accommodate some of the population. My fellow passengers on the shuttle consisted of 2 other people. Alex Mercer was a skilled technician with expertise in maintaining and repairing the base's life support systems and machinery. Dr. Sarah Nguyen was a renowned geologist whose focus was to analyze the moon's surface and subsurface for geological history and resources. My focus was researching and developing sustainable plant species that can thrive in the moon's harsh environment. My goal is to ensure that our colony can sustain human life in the long term by producing food, oxygen, and sustainable ecosystems. Stepping off the ship, the ground crunched beneath our boots as we made our way to the entrance of the base's main building. It was a large, reinforced dome shimmering under the harsh lunar light. As our little group of 3 emerged from the airlock, a voice pulled me from my reverie.
Welcome, team.
Dr. Nathan Kline stood at the entrance. His eyes scanned us with what seemed like a mixture of curiosity and condescension. His white lab coat, immaculate and crisp, flapped in the artificial breeze of the airlock.
Dr. Mia Harrington.
He addressed me directly.
I hope your journey here was satisfactory.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kline. It was. And it's an honor to be here, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as my heart pounded with excitement. Alex and Dr. Nguyen nodded their agreement. I got the distinct impression that Dr. Kline was looking down his nose at all 3 of us, an impressive feat since he wasn't particularly tall, and Alex was much taller than him, probably as much as a foot. He gave a dismissive nod and turned, walking away.
Follow me.
He fired the words over his shoulder. He led us through the labyrinthine corridors of Artemis Haven, each turn revealing more of the facility's state-of-the-art equipment and bustling activity. The scent of recycled air and antiseptic was mixed with the faint, earthy aroma of the hydroponic gardens. I knew there was a small but vital oasis of green in this sterile environment, and I was excited to work in this strange and wonderful new place. As we passed through the hydroponic section, I couldn't help but marvel at the lush greenery thriving in the harsh lunar environment. The sight of vibrant leaves and blooming flowers starkly contrasted with the barren moon's landscape outside. Peering in, I first noticed something unusual. It was a faint blue glow. I stopped following our little group and saw the glow coming from a cluster of flowers in the dim light. "What's this?" I called out. The group, not realizing I was no longer following, finally stopped. Dr. Kline's expression was unreadable.
That is a recent discovery,
he said.
The previous team found them growing in the twilight zone here on the moon. The plant doesn't seem to be any good for anything, but it does have some unique properties.
His stress on the word unique didn't sound positive, making me wonder what he meant. I didn't have to wait long to find out.
They leave a big mess to clean up every single morning,
Dr. Kline said.
Because they shed their flowers every night. No one knows why. It's nothing but a nuisance, if you ask me. My recommendation for that species would be the incinerator.
He grunted.
We're calling it moonflower.
Moonflower? I said with a chuckle. That's unique, seeing as how they found it on the moon. Who thought of that name? Dr. Kline's face told me he didn't have a sense of humor.
I named it,
he said. Oh, what I meant was, I stuttered. There's already a plant back on Earth called moonflower. I decided it was best to change my line of comment. Leaning closer, I brushed a glowing petal. It was warm to the touch. It almost felt like a buzz emanated through the plant, a nearly electric buzz. These are incredible, I said, feeling a strange connection to the plant.
Those flowers are of no consequence,
Dr. Kline said curtly.
The Earth is facing an ecological crisis. Your mission, Dr. Harrington, is to explore new methods to support Earth's population by developing plant species that can thrive in the moon's conditions. What your mission is not,
he said.
is to swoon over pretty flowers.
That was harsh, if not outright insulting.
Just ignore the pretty flowers, Doctor. For now, all you need to do is get settled. Then tomorrow, you will start your assignments.
That night, as I settled into my quarters, the image and strange buzz of the glowing flowers stayed with me, like a song stuck on replay in my mind. I decided that these glowing flowers would not be ignored. My first secret project would be to study the aptly named moonflower in depth. Using my free time and resources covertly, I spent the next 3 months analyzing the flower's unique energy signatures and potential applications for helping Earth's environmental crisis. By day, I served as Artemis Haven's lead botanist and environmental scientist. Among my primary responsibilities were nurturing and developing hybrid plant species brought from Earth. Progress was slow, but we celebrated every tiny breakthrough. Then, no matter how exhausted I was at the end of the workday, I was never too tired for my late-night sessions in the lab with the moonflowers. They were so much more than a scientific curiosity, and I meticulously documented in my research journal, time-stamping my progress. I discovered that the cycle of renewed blooms almost every night seemed to be tied to the moon's rhythm. Dr. Kline had dismissed the fallen blooms as a nuisance, nothing more than a mess to be cleaned up and trashed daily. But every morning, as I was the first to arrive, I collected the shed petals and conducted a series of tests at night. I discovered that the fallen petals contained healing properties of almost miraculous proportions. When ground into a paste, it accelerated cell regeneration and could heal wounds and burns at an astonishing rate. My second discovery was equally astounding. The moonflowers produced a bioluminescent sap that glowed with a soft blue light. This sap emitted a low-level electromagnetic field. My theory was that with fields of flowering vines, like vineyards, this resource could be harnessed to generate clean energy. It could potentially provide a sustainable power source for Artemis Haven. The plant was already well adapted to the moon's atmosphere, something in which our Earth plants were seriously lagging behind. The third revelation was a complete surprise. The moonflower's roots had an even more significant symbiotic relationship with the moon's soil. The roots released enzymes that broke down the moon's regolith, enriching it with vital nutrients and creating fertile ground for other plant species. This meant that the moonflowers could sustain themselves and help terraform the surface, making it habitable for a broader range of plant life. My research and discoveries filled me with a sense of awe and urgency. Late one night, as I worked alone in the lab, my fourth cup of coffee was no longer doing the trick, but I needed to push myself a bit longer. I removed my earphones and connected my playlist to the lab's sound system. Selecting a song with a steady rhythm and soothing melody, waves of soft music filled the room. It was an instrumental tune, and it did the trick, giving me the energy boost needed to finish my project for the night. I looked around to make sure no one else was around. Then, I began belting out a song about being tired but only needing to stay awake for a few more minutes, making up lyrics as I worked, and using a large test tube as a microphone, grateful that no one was around to hear my croaking. Then I noticed something incredible and I froze. The flowers started glowing with a pulse seemingly to the beat of the music. I was so shocked I could have passed out right there and then. As I stood frozen in place, the blooms stopped pulsing as well. I chuckled disbelievingly and spoke a new line, feeling silly as I directed my statement to the moonflowers in time with the melody. If I didn't know any better, I spoke, saying, "I'd think you were singing along as well." The flowers pulsed in response. "Can you understand me?" I continued, my voice blending with the music. The moonflowers responded with a series of flashes, their light intensifying and dimming in what seemed like a deliberate pattern. I picked up my jaw off the floor and started recording the light sequences, noting the corresponding heat signatures that the sensors picked up. The flowers were definitely responding to my questions, and the music was part of the equation. I wanted to wake everyone to share my discovery, but I managed to restrain myself. Later that night in my quarters, I reviewed the recordings and it clicked, coming to me like fresh oxygen after taking off my EVA helmet. I was sure of it. The light patterns were Morse code, or something similar. The system, including several nuances for different languages, was part of the curriculum we needed to learn during space travel training. Excited by the possibility, I decided to test the theory. I figured there would be no sleep tonight, so after showering, I donned my fresh clothing and returned to the lab. Back at the lab, the plants had already shed most of their blooms, but I approached the ones that still seemed strong, again feeling a little silly as I tapped out a simple question in Morse code, using my voice to speak the words. "Do you understand me?" I asked. I almost jumped out of my skin as the moonflowers flashed back a response in a pattern-mirrored Morse code with longer flashes for dashes and shorter flashes for dots. My heart raced as I realized the implications. This plant species was sentient and could communicate in a universally understood code. I took a big breath and continued. "Where do you come from?" I carefully interpreted the responding light patterns and heat signatures. As my questions continued, each response was a piece of a larger puzzle. The flowers revealed that they originated from a distant planet that had experienced environmental collapse similar to Earth's current plight. They had hitched a ride on an asteroid and took up residence on the moon as a last-ditch effort to preserve their species and share their knowledge with any intelligent life they encountered. I couldn't contain my excitement. By the time the clock struck 8 in the morning, marking the start of a new workday, I had discovered that my theory was correct. This plant was a potential solution to help restore balance to Earth's ecosystems, and the answer to terraforming the moon's surface to sustain life much more quickly than originally expected. As the first crew members arrived to start the day, I figured it was time to share my breakthrough with Dr. Kline. Despite my reservations about his cold and dismissive demeanor, I knew this discovery was too important to keep to myself. I hustled to the other side of the hydroponics sector to Dr. Kline's office, barely able to contain my excitement. I didn't bother to knock as his door was always ajar. "Dr. Kline," I said, practically bursting into his office, my voice trembling with anticipation. "I figured it out." He looked up from his desk, eyebrows raised.
Figured what out, Dr. Harrington?
"The moonflowers. They can talk." He angled his head and looked at me on the cut.
Are you feeling okay?
He asked.
I know you've been working extra long hours. Perhaps you should take a break.
"No, you don't understand. I'm serious,"
Okay, Dr. Harrington,
he said.
what's this all about?
"The moonflowers. They communicate using a code similar to Morse code with slight variances, but I've been able to decipher their messages. They're from a distant planet that experienced environmental collapse, and they want to help us save Earth." Dr. Kline narrowed his eyes at me, but as I stood my ground, I could see realization as it dawned on him that I was serious. His eyes widened and he sat up in his chair. He seemed about to say something, but instead his expression softened. He gave me a smile that looked painful for him to endure.
That's remarkable, Mia.
He said. His voice was unusually sweet in addressing me, and by my first name. It was more than a little weird. Perhaps he thought I'd lost my mind. Then his eyes brightened.
Who else knows about this?
He asked. No one. I discovered it overnight and then came straight here. You're the only person I've told so far.
That's good, Mia. Very good. I think it's best if we keep this between us for now.
He said, rising from his chair and rounding his desk.
Now please, show me everything.
We hustled back to the lab, and as we entered, Dr. Kline issued a command to all in the room.
Everybody out!
Everyone turned to look at him, apparently not quite sure what to do.
Now!
He exclaimed, causing the room to erupt with action as all the workers and crew members stopped whatever they were doing and scurried out of the lab. I led Dr. Kline to the moonflower section and demonstrated the flowers' responses and ability to understand and answer my questions. Dr. Kline watched, his eyes growing wide with astonishment as he observed the phenomenon.
This is extraordinary,
he said when I finished the demonstrations.
But listen, Mia, we must exercise caution. Such information could be dangerous. It might cause a frenzy if word gets out prematurely.
My heart sank. I wanted to let the world know this was our salvation, but Dr. Kline was right. Sometimes, people can be cruel about things they don't understand. I understand, I said, my enthusiasm neutered by his words. But this discovery could revolutionize our work here. I think it can solve what's happening to our planet.
Absolutely.
Dr. Kline said.
And that's why it's crucial that we handle this delicately. For now, I want you to keep working with the moonflowers. Discover all you possibly can, and keep all your findings top secret. Report only to me, and share it with no one else. We need to ensure that this knowledge is used wisely and doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
I nodded my agreement, still buzzing with excitement. Of course, Doctor. I'll keep you updated on my progress. As he left the lab, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Dr. Kline's reaction. Perhaps it was the way he was pleasant all of a sudden. It didn't feel right. Maybe it was how he'd referred to me by my first name. I pushed the negative thoughts aside, focusing instead on my discovery and the potential for the future of Artemis Haven and planet Earth. After another 2 weeks of doing as instructed by Dr. Kline, late one night, I was engrossed in my work in the hydroponics lab, conducting more tests on the moonflowers, carefully measuring their responses to musical notes and documenting the data. As usual, everyone else was long gone. As I readied to leave for the night, I yanked off my earbuds and heard laughter from the corridor. Grabbing my bag, I quietly left the lab, not wanting to disturb whoever was still working. Walking past the hydroponics sector, I realized that light and voices were spilling into the corridor from Dr. Kline's office. I intended to slip by silently until I heard Dr. Kline say,
I've managed to communicate with the moonflowers.
I stopped in my tracks. He managed to communicate with the flowers?
Yes. The discovery is unprecedented.
Dr. Kline said. His back was to the door as he continued talking.
They respond to musical notes, and their potential for healing and energy production is beyond anything I've ever seen. This is my greatest discovery yet.
He communicated via the lunar comm, which meant the other person was back on Earth. My heart sank as I listened to Dr. Kline taking credit for all my hard work. I inhaled a calming breath, convincing myself it was okay if I didn't get credit right now. Perhaps it was just an oversight. I felt sure that Dr. Kline would include my name and contributions later. The important thing was for the discovery to benefit all of mankind. Then, a deeper, almost menacing voice responded from the other end of the lunar comm.
Good, Kline,
the voice said.
Very good. Ensure that all findings are documented under your name, and you will get your fair share as long as you stick to the plan. Our investors are eager to see the proof, and we need to take control of this technology before anyone else gets wind of it.
Dr. Kline hesitated, then replied,
Of course, I understand. I've kept a close eye on everything. But there's a young doctor, Mia Harrington, one of my subordinates. She's kind of nosy, and she's been snooping around a lot.
Will she be a problem?
No, not at all. I'm just letting you know, but she won't be a problem. She's too caught up in her little experiments to grasp the reality of what's really happening.
The voice on the other end grunted.
Make sure it stays that way. We can't afford any loose ends. Remember, this discovery has the potential to make us the most powerful organization in the universe, and you, Dr. Kline, are about to become an extremely wealthy man.
The stab of betrayal stole my breath. I had always suspected Dr. Kline had his own agenda. However, hearing him dismiss my contributions and label me a nuisance was infuriating. Additionally, he intended to sell this incredible discovery to the highest bidder. I couldn't allow that to happen. I needed to do something, and I had to be smart about it. Moving forward with my plan, I scheduled a discreet meeting with the base's commanding officer. Colonel Jonathan Mitchell was recognized as a fair and respected leader, known for his dedication to the well-being of Earth's inhabitants and Artemis Haven. As I entered his office, he looked up from his desk, curiosity blazing in his eyes.
Dr. Harrington,
he said, inviting me to sit.
What can I help you with?
The meeting with Colonel Mitchell went as well as could be expected. Next, I contacted my trusted colleague on Earth, Dr. Amanda Collins. I was relieved when her face appeared on the lunar comm.
Mia, it's so good to see you.
Amanda said, smiling warmly. Hey, Amanda, I replied. Always good to see you too.
How are things on Artemis Haven?
She asked.
Is it everything you thought it would be?
It has. And then some, I said. It's been intense, to say the least. You're not going to believe the incredible discovery I've made, but before I get into it, I really need a big favor.
Sounds exciting, and of course, whatever you need. Tell me everything. Start at the beginning.
3 weeks later, I sat next to Colonel Mitchell on one of the chairs on the platform in the presentation hall. My heart raced as I looked out at the gathered staff, crew, and officers of Artemis Haven. And thanks to my friend Amanda's efforts, there were several news reporters who arrived on this morning's shuttle from various networks, including independent stations on Earth. Under the orders of Colonel Mitchell, Artemis Haven's crew had seen that their arrival was discreet, and they had ample help quickly setting up their equipment in the hall. Colonel Mitchell gave me a reassuring nod, and I took a deep breath, stepping up to the podium. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Today will change the trajectory of Earth's well-being. I have vital information to share with you regarding my research on the moonflowers. As I started my presentation, the door to the hall burst open and Dr. Kline stormed in, his face a mask of fury.
What is the meaning of this?
He demanded, glaring at me. Dr. Kline, I said, I'm so glad you decided to join us. I invited him to join me and the Colonel on stage. Dr. Kline ignored my invitation.
This is preposterous,
he exclaimed, his face red with anger.
You have no right.
I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Doctor, I said. This discovery should be free for the betterment of mankind, to prevent diseases, for healing, and to make sure no one goes hungry. It must not be controlled and sold for profit by a select few while the rest of the world continues to suffer, don't you think? Loud murmurs moved across the gathering, and the reporters aimed their cameras at Dr. Kline, eager to capture every moment. Just then, a pleasant ding sounded and a face appeared on the large screen at the front of the room. It was Director Marcus Jameson back on Earth, having been patched in for the presentation. Ah, Director Jameson, I said. You're just in time. Welcome. The director of the Botany Scientific Department and Dr. Kline's boss nodded. Only then did Dr. Kline slink away to the back and sit. The cameras refocused on the stage, and I began my presentation, retracing the history of how I discovered the intricacies of the moonflower, making sure to credit the previous team for the discovery and Dr. Kline for naming it Moonflower.